Yeah, I got 7 now.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, welcome to the Medical Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, September 8th. Looks like we have a quorum, and so we'll go ahead and get started and call to order the meeting. We'll start out with introductions. I'll start John Burley, EMS Medical Director for Monterey County EMS Agency.
Teresa Rios, EMS Director.
Deborah Hopgood, EMS Analyst.
Kimberly Hernandez, EMS Analyst.
Scott Houchin, First Responders.
Ryan Alexander, Salinas Fire.
Steve Brooks, EMS Agency.
Tina Nieto, Law Chiefs.
Keith Boyd, Law Chief's alternate.
Cassie Caldera Natividad.
Ben Hitchcock, AMR alternate.
Will Hiller, AMR CES.
Jeff Warner, Program Director, CalSTAR.
Michelle Kalinsky, Chomp.
Dave Craddock, paramedic.
Okay, I see we have also, looks like Will is on, Dr. Close and Roxanne.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Will Hiller,
Hey, Will.
AMR CES. Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, good morning. Sorry, I didn't know that you couldn't hear us. Roxanne Supersad, EMS Agency, EPI.
Okay, well, thank you and good morning to everyone. We'll go ahead and open up the meeting with an opportunity for public comment. Any member of the public may address the subcommittee for a period not to exceed 3 minutes on any issue not on the subcommittee's agenda. Any specific public comment to open the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, this is Tina Nieto. I was wondering if maybe Keith Boyd could have an opportunity to introduce himself to the bigger committee. He's the new alternate for Law Chiefs.
Yes, go ahead, Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Tina. My name is Keith Boyd. I'm the recently appointed chief in King City, California. I've been with the agency since July of 2019, serving as the captain and then the interim chief for a few months and then the official chief. I have 26 years of experience in law enforcement, primarily in the Bay Area. And I spent 5 years overseeing the coroner in Marin County. So I have a lot of interface previously with EMS and hospital systems. And as a side note, I have a wife in medicine. So it's kind of an important piece for me is the integration of police and EMS.
Great. Thank you, Keith. It's great to have you here with us and welcome.
Welcome.
And I saw Dr. Greenson just joined us as well. So good morning to you, Dr. Greenson.
Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments?
Oh, Dr. Burley, I just wanted to introduce Reb as my alternate since you guys needed somebody in that placeholder. If for some reason I can't be here, she's going to be the alternate for Chomp.
Excellent. Welcome, Dr. Close. And we look forward to having you assist us on the committee as well. I think you're actually muted, Dr. Close, if you're. Okay, any other public comments? Okay, well, that moves us on to approval of past MAC meeting minutes from July 14. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at those and open up to any comments, questions, and then subsequently approval of the minutes.
It's Michelle Kalinsky. I can motion to approve.
Thank you, Dr. Kalinsky. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Scott, thank you. We have a second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes? Take a roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Scott, how?
All right, Dr. Kalinsky just made the motion, so Dr. Greenson,
Aye.
Tiffany Wallace,
Aye.
Cassie Caldera,
Aye.
Dave Craddock,
Aye.
Scott, we heard from you, Will Hiller,
Aye.
Jeff Horner,
Aye.
and Chief Nieto.
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the minutes from July 14 have been approved, which moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is correspondence. We don't have any specific correspondence listed. And that brings us on to reports for the EMS agency updates. Teresa Rios.
Thank you, Dr. Burley. Your agenda packet includes a staff report with updates on the projects that the EMS agency is working on. We are very happy to report that we are in the final stages of being able to implement the use of ketamine and the unified scope of practice. The implementation of these two local scope of practice are in direct response to the needs of the EMS system. We continue, excuse me, to make progress on other projects that we brought to this committee before. One is changes to our mobile app to allow for real-time push notifications to the system. We are in the final review of the amendment to that agreement. As soon as we have that amendment fully executed, we can give the green light to the developer to make the changes to the mobile app. The developer anticipates it will take 6 to 8 weeks to make the changes. And we look forward to rolling this out. We already have some ideas for other changes they would like to discuss with the system first and see those are things that would be useful. So more to come on that. We have also made progress with the medical alarm activations and response. As the staff report indicates, we met with AMR and members from the county comm team to discuss this issue, and we were able to get some data from them. Kimberly Hernandez is right now reviewing the data, and so hopefully by the November meeting, we have something more to be able to report. She has to come through a large data set, so that's why we are not ready to report on that today. For the law enforcement request for medical evaluation by EMS personnel prior to transfer to jail, we were able to get the feedback from the hospitals. We at this point need to connect with law enforcement for the jails. And so Chief Nieto, we would really could use your help in this area.
Hi, Teresa. I did bring it to the larger chiefs, and so they just want to put together a smaller group to talk to you. So, so we have discussed it. I wasn't ignoring you. I just have to get those people that want to sit down and I guess do the work. So.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I was not trying to put you on the spot.
No worries. No worries. We're chiefs. We're used to that. So we just smile and say, it's all good and you're safe. So.
I think that we are on a roll right now with the projects we have taken on. We just want to make sure that we bring them to completion. So we really appreciate your cooperation. We understand how busy everybody is, and that sometimes we make big asks on top of everything else that you have going on. So we appreciate your help in this area. For the interfacility transport of patients with blood and blood products by paramedic ambulance, our application is being put together.
Yeah, we just got the training materials back from the state, the examples, and are working on putting together.
Yeah, so we are putting together our application that will go to the state. Once the state approves it, then we'll be able to get it through the process of implementation here for public comment and everything. So more to come on that. For our EMS internal strategic plan, we have met. I think it's important for the agency, now that we have new members on the team, for us to do that internal work, regroup, refocus, where we see ourselves today and in the future. My goal has been to do a strategic plan system-wide But I felt that we needed to do some internal work first. Once we are ready to take on that project for the entire system, I look forward to everybody participating. I want to give you just a quick highlights on new projects that we have taken on. One is our policy and protocol development cycle, without stealing Steve's thunder, who's going to provide a more detailed report on that project. We have been reviewing different processes, internal processes that, of course, everything that we do affects the system. And we have identified areas of improvement. The policy and protocol development cycle is one of them. We want to extend the timeline for that cycle, primarily to give us more time. So some of that extension does not affect the work that you do. But so we want to start there and just take advantage of our system stakeholders to help us do a better job with the policies and protocols that are being sent out. So we are looking at adding 2 steps in that process, primarily to allow greater input from our system stakeholders, so that by the time that we bring the policies and protocols to MAC, they are a more polished product. We want to do the same thing with our training materials, send them out as drafts so we can get some feedback, maybe have more collaboration there. Sometimes when we get the feedback in writing and then we try to respond to that, we might lose something there. It could be taken care of if we come together as a group and really hash out that public comment and really get clarification on what somebody means and what we might have meant when we wrote the policy. So Steve is going to provide a more detailed report on that. Our unusual occurrence report case review also needed some attention and some changes there. We want to make sure that what we do is consistent with just culture that we have emphasized for a number of years. And one of the things that we found out as we reviewed our process is that, as Dr. Burley has put it, that we did not have enough tools in our toolbox. And so we started brainstorming as to some of the changes that we could make to make sure that we are consistent with just culture and that the tools that we use really reflect that what we are trying to accomplish. We have met with some of our stakeholders. We have a meeting scheduled with our hospitals. We wanted to really focus our attention to each group because each group looks at things sometimes from a very unique perspective, and we wanted to give that its own attention. So we will be meeting with the hospitals next week. Is that correct? Yes, next week. And we are presenting some of our ideas, allowing for the feedback to take place, and then putting the final drafts of the additional tools that we want to implement and get that circulated. We want to be able to implement these changes soon, the sooner the better, so that we can change how the whole experience of both from the paramedic and EMTs or the hospitals and even for the agency. We want to make sure that we are doing our case reviews in a timely manner. So I think that the changes that we are implementing will help with that. So more to come on that. Our EMT and paramedic application processing is also being revamped. We want to join the 21st century and allow all of our applications to be submitted online, even allow acceptance of payments online. And so that will also cause us other changes in terms of the documentation. We want to make it easier for everybody and just for the applicant as well as us. I think also overall with all of our processes, I think that one of the things we'd like to do is just communicating that process to the system, because if the system doesn't know how we handle things, then they might felt left in the dark or not understanding why something happens a certain way. So I think getting more communication out to the stakeholders will be useful, and we continue to welcome any feedback that anybody has. So with every project that we are taking on, we are not working in a vacuum. We are making sure that we are reaching out to every stakeholder in our system and really considering the feedback and trying to find, we always find ourselves in a tricky position sometimes, trying to strike a balance, because we can get feedback that goes from one end of the extreme to the other, or from so many different angles, that we need to balance all of that. So we appreciate your the fact that you are so candid with your feedback, but also that you consider the fact, that the position that the agency is in, and that we do our best to strike the right balance for the system. That is, in the law enforcement naloxone program is another project that we're taking on. We are formalizing it more, with an application process that is clear, and also the tracking, anything that we can do so that we don't have to touch that piece of paper and do data entry. We're looking at, we're working internally with our IT department in developing some of the databases that will allow us to do that, and allow us to run reports that will give us data that will inform how the system is doing. So once we get more into this and more into the IT part of that, we will provide more reports. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Teresa. Any questions regarding EMS agency updates? Okay, that brings us on to MOAC activities, and Deborah has a report for us.
Good morning. There's a written report in your agenda packets with some information in there for you. The beginning is some COVID-related data. I think the big take home from that is that since early July, we've seen about a 10-fold increase in both the case rate and our test positivity rate. And that's led to kind of what you would expect as far as a large increase in the number of people hospitalized as well. We've gone from 3 to roughly 43 patients, depending on which day you look at the data. Also an increase in the number of patients in ICU. Last I looked, there were 8, and then 6 on ventilators actually, which is a big increase. The other interesting thing is the increase of the Delta variant throughout August and then early September. All of the sequenced cases in Monterey County have been the Delta variant. That's pretty on par with the state. The statewide numbers are 98% for that same time period. Our vaccination plan is also going well. We're currently at 78% of the eligible population in the county that have received at least 1 dose, and then 68% that are fully vaccinated. The number is 65.3% statewide last I looked, so we're pretty much on par with the state average there. We're also continuing to process supply requests. The state has started to pare down its warehouse inventories and combine warehouses and try to cut down on some of that inventory. So they're not replenishing a lot of the items. So some items are no longer available. Some of the big ones that pop up a lot are small gloves and tie-back suits. Please do continue to put in your requests. We continue to push them through to the state, and perhaps they'll decide to restock some of those items. The other big challenge that we're seeing is related to testing. Binax now is completely unavailable at this point due to some issues with the manufacturer. We don't have an ETA for when they'll start sending through those orders again. I've heard anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. So obviously that's a big hit with all the testing that we're trying to do in response to the increase in transmission. On a non-COVID note, we also did some work around Car Week this year. The Office of Emergency Management kind of significantly scaled up their planning for the events. So they put together an incident action plan, which we drafted a medical plan using ICS 206 for. I want to thank both AMR and Regional Fire for their participation in sending over their staffing and event plans for their portion of Car Week. There is an after action review that's going to be scheduled, that is scheduled for September 9th that we'll be participating in as well. If anybody needs information for that, let me know. Happy to get that to you. As fire season has grown, we're also seeing a lot of requests for ambulances for strike teams to staff the various fires. I know I've been sending out a lot of emails to those of you who have ambulances. I apologize for that, but I don't think that will decrease anytime soon. So just please respond back to that if you're unable to help, and let me know, and then we can get back to the both the region and the state, who are the ones asking for that information originally. So if there's some way that that process could work better for you guys, please let me know as well, and I'm happy to modify things. The other big news that we've seen is that on August 16th, the California Department of Public Health put out a state public health order related to hospital surge. And it sets up some conditions under which hospitals are supposed to notify both the Mohawk locally, the region, and then the state if they're at certain ICU level conditions or certain capacity conditions. And then that puts in place the ability to transfer patients when they can be sent somewhere that would be clinically appropriate for them. So basically it makes that transfer process mandatory. So I've been putting out some polls as well for open ICU or med surg beds using ReadyNet. So that seems to be working well for the hospitals. I've been getting a much more timely response when I've been putting those out. So I do appreciate that. And also want to thank the folks at CHOMP who were able to help out with a hospital, up in the northeast corner of the state that had a couple of ICU patients that they were looking to get rid of. So I know we stressed the House supervisor a little bit that night, but we really appreciate the help with that. And we gave some feedback from her to the region and hopes to kind of smooth out that process a little bit. So, and then I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions. And there is a copy of that public health order attached to the Mohawk report if you have any questions about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Any questions regarding Mohawk? Let's bring us on to old business. And the first item under the agenda is policy and protocol development cycle for ketamine for pain management and unified scope of practice with an effective date of October 1, 2021. Steve Brooks has a report for us.
Just one moment.
I think she's not on. I don't think she's online.
Is Susan going to do her presentation?
Oh yeah, we should have.
So me first?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so good morning. We've been through the public comment process for two local optional scope of practice items. One is what we call the unified scope. It's the policy that allows flight paramedics to have essentially a single scope of practice as far as what they can do and how they do it, so that they don't get stuck as they work between various counties, having to ensure that what's most fresh in their memory and what they're going to do for a patient and what's likely critical scene will be appropriate for that county. By having unified scope, the paramedic, regardless of which county they work, as a flight paramedic, they'll be working under a single scope of practice. So we submitted this policy to the state for approval as a local optional scope, and we received approval from the state. Now we've had it out for public comment. It has gone through the public comment process without any comments. So we're now bringing it to this committee for endorsement. And at this point, that's a staff recommendation that this committee endorse the policy.
Can we get a motion for endorsement?
Good morning, Steve. This is Jeff with CalStar. Again, I just want to thank the EMS agency for their support and their work on moving this forward with the state and the adoption. And this will help to practice for the flight paramedics crossing county lines and deploying from other counties more uniform, and expanding some of their skill set that they can apply to patient care. So with that, thank you again, and I would like to move to have this adopted and approved.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, we have a motion for endorsement and a second. We'll go ahead and take roll call for endorsement of the unified scope of practice policy.
Dr. Kalinsky,
Yes.
Dr. Greenson,
Yes.
Tiffany Wallace,
Yes.
Betsy Caldera,
Yes.
Dave Craddock,
Yes.
we heard from Scott, Will Hiller,
Yes.
Jeff, and Chief Nieto.
Yes, it's Tina. I tell you guys that all the time. Tina.
Thank you, Chief Nieto. All right, great. So it looks like we have endorsement regarding the unified scope policy. Thank you all. And that moves us on to the other item under this agenda item, which is ketamine for pain management.
Yes, so in response to your request, we've adopted ketamine as another option for pain control. Ketamine does have some benefit in that it's not a opiate narcotic, so it can be used at times when that may not be desirable. And there's a few other properties as far as how long it has a great effect. So sometimes it helps, for the ED evaluation. What we have with this is we again submitted to the state for their approval under our local optional scope, as ketamine is not in the basic scope for paramedics. They approved our policy. This ketamine is used only for the adult patient. And in this case, the definition of adult is consistent through our policies for our use of our protocols, which is age 9 and older. Then we submitted this for public comment, and we did receive public comments. So we'll go over the public comments. We can pull the public comments up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know we were going to review that. We'll have to go to the agenda packet itself, go back one folder. And then it's item 8. It starts with 08.
Okay, thank you. So we received several public comments, primarily from AMR, and I won't read them, but there's again question regarding outcome data for the use of ketamine, and of course our response is we haven't used it yet, so we have no local data. On the other hand, it has been used in many counties in California across the country very successfully, and the dosages that we're using, very little adverse effect with the ketamine. At higher dosages, of course, we see that in the news when people are using it for sedation, and that we're not going to go there. So also a question is regarding sedation or chemical restraint, and again with the effects, the potential adverse effects, we are not using ketamine for that. And let's see the next one. Oh, related to stocking of ketamine, we do believe that ketamine has other benefits that you won't find with the opioid narcotics. So we are putting this into effect for that. Also, there's some questions to the carrying of both morphine and fentanyl and ketamine, and we've revised the policy that an agency can carry both morphine and fentanyl, or either morphine or fentanyl is fine. But because of the difference in the mechanism with ketamine, we are having ketamine and one of the opioid narcotics is what we expect to be carried on the vehicles at the ALS level. Next, why is this coming off cycle? And that's because we think there's some major benefits to ketamine, not the least of which is the fact that we will have a non-opioid narcotic available. And with our epidemic of opioid overdoses that Dr. Close will be addressing, this seems to be the way to go, and to bring it in earlier is important. And then, yes, it's going to be required for all agencies. So those are the public comments that were received. And in addition to this policy, because it does require a change in the authorized stock policy, that policy will be changed administratively. as well as our narcotic policy that lists the narcotics we carry as a Schedule 3. That will be on there, and the paramedic scope of practice policy will be expanded to include ketamine. The one thing about the authorized stock policy is Dr. Burley has decided that a specific preparation of ketamine, which is the 10 milligrams per milliliter in the, 100 milligrams per milliliter in the 5 milliliter vial is going to be the authorized preparation to carry. We did an extensive search. We can't find any preparations of ketamine in smaller amounts, and using the 105, or excuse me, the 505 or the 100 per milliliter will allow for better math and therefore safer administration of the ketamine.
Yeah, just to clarify, so it would be 100 milligrams in per milliliter, making the math easy.
Yes. So there's a lot. Please don't give the whole vial. But unfortunately, that's the only way we see that it's available. So with that, the EMS agency is looking for endorsement, or if there's any questions.
I think in your stock, you have 10 milligrams per ml here instead of 100.
Sorry, I'll
take a look. Yeah.
I'll check, but that's the intent is it's basically,
100, should be 100.
yeah, there's 500 milligrams total, and we'll make sure that that's correct.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, and just to understand, this will be required to stock it then.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking for a October 1 implementation.
Okay. If there are no other comments or questions.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Keith Boyd, just the alternate for police chiefs. As we roll this out, is there going to be education provided to the medics and such regarding recent case history throughout the United States? I completely understand the perspective of why we're doing what we're doing, but I also want to make sure that we ensure our medics and staff are apprised of recent events in, let's say, the state of Colorado, where 2 medics and 3 police officers were indicted for a ketamine usage that, based on initial information that I've been able to read, seems to have been inappropriate for the circumstances and completely outside the scope of the policy that EMS agency instituted. So I just want to make sure if A, are we aware, is our EMS agency aware of that recent matter, and that B, we've taken in consideration what may have occurred there, how much dosing occurred, and how that grand jury reacted to that situation.
Yeah, and I just also want to add, because that's the same thing when I saw it, because of the recent high-profile case. But I know that you did answer that ketamine is not going to be used for sedation, which is, they were using it for that reason, to calm down a person. But I just want to make sure all those things were taken into consideration. So when we talk to the law chiefs, they're aware of it, because it was a high-profile case across the whole nation that has affected law enforcement.
And my concern is we're using a small dose, but we're providing a vial. It's how it's available, and how it's available leads to access, and access could lead to excessive dosage.
So thank you both for those comments. We certainly are aware of the incident that you're referring to, and others that have occurred across the country. And so for that reason, we've made the decision that ketamine will be used for pain control in a much lower dose than would be used for behavioral emergencies. So this is not intended to be used to sedate uncooperative or violent patients. I think those were the situations in which the EMS providers and law enforcement ended up with an unfortunate outcome. And so, to that regard, our policy is focused on pain control and not behavioral emergencies. The dosage being used is markedly lower than the dosage that will be used for behavioral emergencies. Or we're recommending 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. And generally the dosage that's used for behavioral emergencies is somewhere in the 1.5 to 2. So it's many-fold decrease from what would be used in behavioral emergencies.
Thank you for that.
What's that? Dr. Kalinsky has a comment?
So I just had a question timeline wise, because I know this has been an issue for agencies in the past. We don't have the policy approved, and it's literally 3 weeks away that you want to implement and have your entire workforce trained on a drug that they really have never seen. Are we certain that we can comply and get appropriate training to get this instituted in a safe way? Asking more for Ben, Will, and all those guys who have to do this.
This is Will from AMR. I'd say it would be quite a lift to make sure that our entire workforce is educated and that we do get the stock by the 1st. But if that's what the agency moves towards, we'll do our best to comply.
I mean, I'm just wondering why we're having, I think this needs to move forward. The push and the timeline that you're moving this is such that, especially in the concentrations you're carrying, and a 10-fold miscalculation is going to be unbelievably problematic. And, I don't know, it's just a lot of training to ask these guys to go through their entire workforce on a drug they've never seen. So just wondering if this is really the best for the system.
Thank you, Dr. Kalinsky. So yeah, I mean, it's a valid concern, and again, we've composed training to be utilized for our stakeholders. That has been available for or has been put together already. We've essentially, it's taken, I think, a little longer to get this through the process than we anticipated. So although we're kind of endorsing now, this has been on the radar for some time now. Thoughts, Steve, as far as the October 1 rollout date? Do our stakeholders feel that they need additional time for rollout, or what are thoughts of some other stakeholders?
We would need 60 to 90 days to roll it out, especially given the environment. We have a third of our departments deployed throughout the state. Our previous processes were a 60-day opportunity to get the training out. We have lots of tools to use, but as Dr. Kalinsky, this is a medication we're not very familiar with. Knowledge-wise, I don't think it's a big leap, but from a consistency standpoint, and I don't know if there's any shortages of ketamine, to be honest with you. No, I don't think so. But yeah, that 60 to 90 days is really the minimum standard that we need to ensure that we have competencies that meet the standard for safe administration to the public. It really is super important. And we talked about this, but we haven't had the protocol or specific direction of what we're going to train to.
And I think this historically, you guys, has sort of been the standard that I've heard from you guys. And honestly, you've pushed it out even 3 to 6 months in the past. So I was just a little concerned. Happy to go with whatever the field folks thinks is best, but just want to have a voice for them that allows them to get appropriate training.
Yeah, this is Tina from Law Chiefs again. If this goes to vote, I'm probably just going to have to abstain from voting because I haven't talked to the rest of the chiefs, and I know they're going to have some issues and not issues against it. I'm not saying we're against it, just they want to know about it before I vote yay or nay. So that's why I would be abstaining if it goes to vote today.
So we're, thank you again for those comments and concerns. And I completely agree that the most important thing is that we're doing this in a safe manner, and that our field providers feel comfortable in administration and dosing. We don't want to push this too aggressively and have a bad outcome. And so, one option we have would be to push the rollout date from October 1 to January 1, which should give you plenty of time for training. Thoughts? Yeah. So I think we'd be okay with doing that. Any other comments, suggestions, thoughts regarding the rollout date? Okay, so hearing no other comments or regarding that, why don't we entertain a new motion for the rollout of, for the endorsement of ketamine for pain management with a January 1, 2022 rollout date. If we could have a motion for endorsement of that.
I'll make a motion to endorse that.
Thank you, Scott. So we have a motion on the floor. Can we get a second?
This is Will Hiller from AMR. I'll second that.
Thank you, Will. So we have a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call for a vote.
Dr. Kalinsky,
Sorry, guys. Yes, I flipped screens.
no problem. Dr. Greenson,
Yes.
Tiffany Wallace,
Yes.
Patsy Caldera,
Yes.
Dave Craddock.
Yes.
I heard from Scott and we heard from Will. Jeff Horner
Yes.
and Tina Nieto.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you. So the motion for endorsement carries. Thank you all, and we'll go ahead and push that back to a January 1, 2022 rollout date with lots of opportunity for training and preparation. So that brings us to the next item under old business, which is law enforcement requests related to blood glucose, jail, and medical checks. And Deborah has a report for us on that.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add beyond what Teresa already spoke to. We are continuing to seek to work with law enforcement through Tina Nieto to bring these items before the chiefs and get their feedback on it. My hope at this point would be to be able to include any policy changes, including if we choose to implement the intoxicated clearance form in with the next policy and protocol cycle, which Steve will go into more detail about the next time or later in the meeting, I guess I should say.
Thank you, Deborah. So I see that Susan Blitch from County Council is on with us. Welcome, Susan. And she has a presentation for us that was slated under new business, but to be considerate of her time, I wanted to move that up so that she could go ahead and address that now and give us the benefit of her expertise on the Brown Act.
If I may, Dr. Burley, well, Susan prepares, I just want to say that one of the things that the EMS agency wants to do is to have an onboarding, a formalized onboarding process for new members. Part of that onboarding process is going to be a presentation on the Brown Act, which I think for us, it would be a good idea to see if this presentation can be done at a committee annually. I think it's a good reminder for current members and very useful for new members. And Susan has been gracious enough to agree to do this presentation for us. So I hope that everybody finds it as useful as we have found it in the past. We have had enough turnover in the committees that we felt we needed to do this. So we want to. The hope is to do this on a July meeting with the beginning of the term for everybody. And so for next, we can look forward to this presentation also come July. But I hope the new members find it helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And I am trying to figure out how to move the slides from one to.
I think maybe just.
Oh, right
There
here.
we go.
Okay, there. Thank you all. I am not technologically proficient, as you can see. So thank you for the introduction. I am Susan Bletch. I'm an Assistant County Counsel for County of Monterey. Most of you know me. Most of you have had some kind of Brown Act training. Some of you have not. So I'm going to try to stick to the 1,000-foot level. If anybody has a question, just call out and interrupt me, and I will try to answer your questions. I apologize ahead of time to those that are sitting on the EMCC, since you'll be getting the exact same training at the EMCC. So you can tune out and look at your phones when that happens. But people often forget at these smaller committees that they are Brown Act committees. So I think it's important to kind of remind everybody that this is a public meeting and open to the public. The intent and purpose of the Brown Act is really to aid the public in participating in the decisions that government makes and the legislature makes. And the sole goal of the Brown Act is that meetings should be held in the open and actions of legislative bodies should be taken openly and not behind closed doors. Everyone pretty much knows that the act is broadly interpreted. So if there's any question, the courts will rule in favor of having an open meeting and an open discussion. Everybody understands the legislative body. It's a governing body of a local agency, and it includes standing committees. And in this case, the EMCC and the Medical Advisory and Operations are standing committees and governed by the Brown Act. A meeting of those committees is any congregation of a majority of the members. So anytime you have a majority of the people on the MAC or MAC, what do you all use? MAC?
Mac.
Yes.
Any meeting with any congregation, anytime you get together with a majority of the members of the MAC, it's considered a Brown Act meeting. And anytime you meet to discuss, deliberate, or take actions on any item, this is EMCC, but it's the same with MAC, it's considered a meeting under the Brown Act. Action is any collective decision made by a majority of the members. And why this is important is this body can't meet in private to decide how they're going to vote on an item. And you can't do that, you know, over coffee at a restaurant, can't do it through email, you can't do it through phone calls. And some of the trip ups, if you will, of the Brown Act are what we called serial meetings. And I don't know why it's doing that, but and the best example I can give is through an email chain. When, say, Dr. Burley emails the chief and says, I'm going to vote on this item this way, the chief gets that and emails somebody else on the committee and says, okay, Dr. Burley's going to vote this way. that is a serial communication that is prevented by the Brown Act, because you are deciding on how you're going to vote on an item outside a public meeting. I just want to caution everybody. I'm not a huge social media user myself, as you guys can probably see, but there was a new law adopted in 2020 that makes social media posts a potential violation of the Brown Act. And what I have seen the courts frown on, or the Attorney General frown on, is Twitter. We have a board member that often goes on Twitter to express support for various items. The courts have actually said that liking something on Twitter or showing support for something on Twitter that covers a decision a legislative body makes can be a kind of like a serial meeting where you're kind of showing support and deciding on an action item before you get to the open meeting. So even a thumbs up, even just a smiley face could be seen as a potential violation of the Brown Act. My advice usually is don't go on social media unless it's just reporting things that an organization has done. But it's just a warning. There's very few case law on this, but it's kind of a danger area, if you will. The Brown Act meeting is basically just says the meetings have to be open. Sign-in sheets, many meetings use sign-in sheets. It's technically voluntary. A person can show up to a meeting and refuse to say who they are, refuse to give a name, and you have to let that person go ahead with the meeting. You can't say, no, you need to introduce yourself. There are requirements for posting an agenda for a regular meeting 72 hours before the meeting. And essentially the purpose of agenda is to notify the public of what will be discussed and what actions will be taken at the meeting. They don't have to be so detailed that you get bogged down, but they have to let the public know what you're talking about and what you are going to be doing at the meeting. There cannot be any action or discussion about any item if it does not appear on the agenda. And the agenda packet has to be available to everyone. If somebody with a disability asks for it to be in an alternative form, we have to comply with the ADA. We have to provide that form. Something that came up a lot a couple years ago are urgency and emergency add-ons. Urgency add-ons require the body to
Looks like we, looks like we may have lost Susan for a moment. Please bear with us while we try to get this back up and running.
Okay, I just text her. And let her know.
All right, I'm back.
Hey, good.
I was probably droning on and didn't notice. So let me get back to sharing. How much did you guys hear of additions to the regular agenda?
So yeah, this was the slide, and you kind of went out right at the beginning of this slide.
So essentially, the only way you can add to an agenda is by deciding by 2/3 vote, or unanimous if you don't have 2/3 of the members present, that there's a need to take immediate action, and the need to take action came to the attention of the agency after posting of the agenda. So you can't just do an urgency add-on because you forgot to put something on an action item on a subject matter that you were planning to talk about in any event. It truly is something that came up at the last minute that you weren't aware of. Emergencies, it's a pretty strong definition of emergency. Think earthquake, pandemic, that kind of thing. It's going to be unusual that this committee adds something by urgency or emergency. All right. So hope I don't go out again. Public comment. The meetings are open and the public has the opportunity to comment on anything on the agenda. So after and before, or take that back, before action is taken on anything, before a vote, you have to have the opportunity for public comment. What happens in these small committees is you can look around and you can look on Zoom and see there's no public, and you can just proceed. But anytime there's a member from the public in the committee, you need to stop and ask if there's any public comment on the agenda. Also, there's an opportunity for the public to speak about anything not on the agenda. Usually for the Board of Supervisors, for instance, it can be limited in time to, I've seen it anywhere from 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on how many people show up to a meeting. So you can take control of public comment and limit the time, but you do have to give everyone who wants to the opportunity to speak. Special meetings, not usually used for this committee, but they're kind of a pain in the neck in that you have to deliver notice of the special meeting to the newspaper. So unless it's super important or there's a unique reason, I would stick to regularly scheduled meetings. More requirements for special meetings. I don't want to bore you with that. Agenda packets. If anybody requests one, they have to be sent to that person. You can establish a fee to do that, but it can't exceed the cost of providing the agenda packets. Most people now will agree to get the packet by email, which cuts down a lot of the cost and time. Not that anyone's going to do it, but the penalties for violating the Brown Act can be significant. It is a misdemeanor, and you can have criminal prosecution. The prosecutor would have to show that there was some kind of intent to deprive the public of information, which it had a right to know. So don't freak out about, minor Brown Act. Take it seriously, but don't freak out that you're going to be criminally charged. I haven't seen that in this county. I have seen the DA investigate allegations of Brown Act violations. There can also be civil actions which come with the inclusion of attorney's fees. So from the county's perspective, we do get, I'd say about once a year, a Brown Act violation lawsuit, and where the person is trying to get attorney's fees. Finally, I want to just say COVID-19. Governor Newsom issued an order which basically allows these Zoom type meetings. There used to be a very onerous requirement if a member of a committee was going to attend a public meeting by video or by telephone, including the fact that you had to post that person's address, where they were calling from, and allow the public to show up at that location. All of that was suspended for very good reason for COVID. This is set to expire September 30th. There are 2 legislative bills pending. Assembly Bill 703 would allow for the continued operations of virtual meetings, and would remove the onerous requirements that are in the Brown Act right now for attendance from a different physical location. My personal opinion is, I think the Zoom meetings have been working very well despite the technical difficulties I just had. I think it's actually increased public participation because the public doesn't actually have to physically go to the meeting site and can simply log on to their computer. It remains to be seen whether Governor Newsom will do another order that extends the time for Zoom meetings to be allowed, or if this assembly bill will pass. There is another assembly bill that takes away the permitted Zoom meetings, if you will, and indicates virtual meetings should only be allowed for a declared emergency. Right now, we do have declared emergencies for the pandemic. How that would work or what requirements would be needed are unknown at this time. So there should be some, as I understand, there's pretty strong support for continuing virtual meetings. Again, I'm supportive of them, and I think they increase public participation, but time will tell. They only have a couple weeks to do something about it. With that, I've tried to keep it short, so not to bore everyone, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. It's extremely helpful. And any questions for Susan regarding the Brown Act or our meetings?
Just one question, would the annual refresher, would that be an online like 700 forms? It's an in-person refresher? You know, what's the goal with that?
Like Susan's presentation?
Yeah.
So we would probably do that at MAC and
At MAC.
EMCC, I would imagine, similar to what we've done today, right?
On the 700 form, is that?
He-
what
he-
you-
no,
Well,
he's
no, I'm just
saying-
kind of
he's
like
saying
700 forms would go
annually Susan's
online
gonna
and
make
we
a similar
put our.
presentation or,
Yes.
you know.
So yeah, we're working on formalizing an onboarding packet in process for new members. And, you know, we'll do everything with all the members is the first time. And we can go over some of those other things. And if there's interest for presentations on other items, then we can definitely bring them to the committee.
Great. Thank you once again, Susan. Really appreciate your time, and we will see you at EMCC.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all for allowing us to take that item agenda out of turn, and that will move us back to old business. We just finished items B, so the next item under old business is item C, disposition of intoxicated persons, and Deborah has a report for us on that.
That would actually be similar to the last item in that we're continuing to seek to work with law enforcement to review the draft form that we put together and would look to incorporate that in the next policy and protocol cycle change as well.
Perfect, thank you, Deborah. And the next item on the agenda is the local optional scope of practice for blood and blood product transfusion monitoring.
I believe Teresa mentioned that during her report as well. We just received the training items from the state and we'll be working on preparing the LOSOP application to go to the state. The next opportunity for review of that by MDAC would be at the December meeting. So we would look to include that in the next policy and protocol cycle as well.
And then that brings us to the next item, which is trauma destination protocols. You want to just comment about that?
Sure. We met as a group to review the trauma triage protocol and the destination protocol. After the last MAC meeting, we determined that there are some changes for clarification that need to be made. We will be preparing a draft of those changes and including those in the next policy and protocol cycle as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Deborah. Unless there are any other comments under old business, we can move on to new business. And the first item on the agenda was Susan's presentation regarding the Brown Act. So again, thank you to Susan for that. The next item is local optional scope of practice for COVID vaccine and testing. And Steve has a report for us regarding that.
This is simple. We have approached the state with the application to continue to do testing and vaccination. The whole group of the applications from all the local EMS agencies is being reviewed at the policy committee, I believe on the 27th of this month. So as much as we'd like to move forward, we are a little stuck until the policy review committee reviews the applications and says, yes, we're good to go. So we hope that everything will continue as is. The only real change we made is to lower the age of vaccination to 12 because that's what the vaccination are being approved for. And hopefully we can then just continue on doing what we've been doing.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I thought it, gosh, for the last DAG meeting, I thought Dr. Duncan had indicated that they had extended these through the end of the year at the state authority level already.
We
No.
haven't received communication.
Yeah. He's extended some things. I don't know if that affects our local scope application. So, you know, it's a little bit of a limbo land, but I expect that we won't have a gap.
Okay.
Everything should continue forward, even as we wait for the approval.
Okay, and so the next item under new business is EMS personnel vaccination status and hospital status. Deborah has a report for us regarding that.
This was actually a discussion item that was requested by one of the committee members who isn't here today. But he was looking to raise the issue with the other hospital personnel in particular related to the recent requirement for healthcare workers to have received the vaccination and some of the requirements related to visitors to facilities, and just to get some information from the other facilities, how they might be handling unvaccinated EMS personnel coming into the facility. So I don't know if anybody has any input on that or any thoughts.
So I don't know that we fully addressed this, but you're correct in that we do have a workforce vaccine requirement and we do have a visitor requirement for testing. Do we know what percentage of the EMS workforce is unvaccinated?
The vast majority of agencies do not have a requirement in place. We don't know the percentages of those that are vaccinated. I know a couple of the very small agencies are at 100%, but we would have to compile that information from the agencies.
It's varied from
And-
60 to 95 to 100%. I mean, it's
So-
a lot, right?
So given those issues, what is the standpoint on testing as we move forward for unvaccinated? What's the protocol going to be?
There isn't currently a requirement from the state public health put in place. They were questioned about it at a recent meeting of hospitals, and they said they had no comment on the requirements for EMS personnel to be vaccinated. So at this point,
Okay.
it stands with individual agency policies and procedures.
Okay, but they are requiring many workforces that are in public to either test or vaccinate. Did they put a requirement in for testing?
They did not.
He has unfortunately fallen through the cracks.
That is unfortunate because I think we're going to have to address this issue. I'll take it to my administration and put it up to the folks who are going to be in charge, but obviously we can't really, it's going to be difficult to decide how to support somebody who's providing direct health care that's unvaccinated, coming into the facility unvaccinated, untested, when we require it from all of our own employees and all of our visitors. So I suspect we're going to request that you guys test your workforce if they're unvaccinated, but I will get back with you with the formal recommendation on that.
This is Dr. Greenson. Can I second that?
This is Cassie Caldera, same for Natividad. I'll take it up to admin.
But I am surprised, honestly, you guys, that the EMS agency hasn't come up with a plan, at least locally, even if it's not mandated, for how you're going to address this, particularly in view of the fact that things like teachers all have to be tested now twice a week, and hotels and all these other people. So we probably should look at this in a broader thing rather than just in terms of hospital interaction, safety of our patients in the back of the rig, that type of thing.
This is Dr. Greenson again. I agree again.
Yeah, I think a lot of the challenge related to that is that locally, the public health is deferred to the state requirements on testing and vaccination mandates, and the EMS, like Dave said, EMS has fallen through the cracks with that process.
So we'll bring it to our hospital administration. I'm sure the council will come up with a united voice to try to address this in an appropriate way.
Hi, this is Tina again. I sit in these conversations with our city all the time, and so it would be helpful if a committee such as this made those recommendations, because there is some pushback from different groups. So it's not as easy to say, just everybody go do it. And I know our county council got off, but there's a lot of stuff going on legally and challenges to that. So the more stuff cities can have where they're pushing for these workers to get vaccinated, I think it just helps the cities make those decisions more easily.
So I don't know that we can add anything to the current agenda, making that recommendation based on our recent conversation. However, maybe we should put that as an agenda item for our next MAC. And again, I'm sure we will have a hospital voice that will come forward with requests that if you have an unvaccinated component of your workforce and you aren't mandating vaccination, you at least mandate testing twice a week.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good discussion and certainly timely. As our response to the pandemic continues to evolve, and hospitals have gone to this model, and the state has gone to this model in other areas. And so we just want to make sure that, any recommendations or requirements that we put out are legal and won't get, won't get pushback from a legal standpoint. So at any rate, I think it's a good discussion to have. We'll put it on the agenda for next MAC meeting. And that'll also give us some time to, discuss it with county council and to look at it more closely from an agency perspective. Obviously, the agency has been recommending that pre-hospital staff be vaccinated, and we've been pushing for that throughout the pandemic. And fortunately, vaccine compliance with pre-hospital staff is fairly high. But I think it's still an important discussion to have.
But I do think I just think as an education component, knowing agency wise what your percentage of vaccinated workforce are and where they are and where your pockets are is probably something that would be great to have information wise if you guys want to try to get that.
Yeah, and I guess that, one question that just comes to my mind is whether that would be HIPAA compliant. So we're requiring employees or stakeholders to report their vaccination status may be a violation of HIPAA, so we'd have to look into that as well.
Can I make a request just as a discussion point too, since we have an EMS administrator and an EMS medical director on the panel? Would you be willing to reach out to your peer groups at MSAC and MDAC to see if they're willing to solicit the state to come up with a better policy than a recommendation? Because a recommendation is great, but it's just a feel-good piece of paper. It has no teeth and it has no authority. And if the state EMS authority were to actually come out with a policy that had the support of MDAC and MSAC, I think it would be a lot easier for everyone. That's just one person's point of view, but I wanted to bring it to the table since we're having the conversation right now.
I would definitely agree with that. And then I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I saw on the Salinas Chamber site, Fenton and Keller are doing a program regarding COVID-19 employment, HIPAA, and all of that. If you go to the Salinas Chamber, they'll have a direct link for it, and they're going over all the legal aspects and implications.
Thank you, and I'm certainly happy to go to MDAC and get input from the other EMS medical directors there and what our thoughts are from sort of a state perspective. So again, good discussion, and we'll take a look at things and come back at the next MAC meeting and hopefully have more information to discuss on this.
Yes, and the MSAC group is also has had some discussions. I'm blanking out right now, but I know there was a letter of support. There was a letter that went out in support of including EMS personnel in the last letter that went out requiring the vaccine. But I can't say for sure right now whether that letter was from MSAC or another group.
Okay, good. Unless there's any more discussion on that item, that'll bring us on to item number D, which is ambulance patient offload times. And Kimberly has a report on that.
Good morning. Hold on just one second while we get the PowerPoint pulled up. Do slideshow. Okay, and you can go to the next slide.
So in June and July, the APOT times throughout all the hospitals stayed relatively stable, with the exception of an uptick in the average and the 90th percentile at me. You can go to the next slide, Karina. I looked into the time intervals in APOT 2, which puts all the APOT times into different time intervals, and 95.9% of me's APOT times were 0 to 20 minutes, and it was 4.1% of the extended APOT times were just for 3 patients that were transported by the same hospital, by the same ambulance together. So just these 3 calls made it look like there was a jump in APOT times, but really it was an isolated incident. And other than that, really that's what caused the uptick in because they have a lower volume of calls, just those 3 calls kind of shot up their 90th and their average. But overall, everyone stayed pretty stable in June and July. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. The next item on the agenda under new business is policy protocol cycle revamp project, and Steve Brooks has a report for us.
In consideration of the time we're running up against the end of the meeting, I'll run through this fairly quickly. So I wanted to start with why do we have policies and protocols? Of course, we would think that these are the EMS rules to live by, which ultimately it is. But it also is a way that we provide local guidance for the statutes and regulations. It gives us a common operating picture, so everybody's coordinated within an agency and also from multiple agencies. We provide the same level of care, we have the same understanding. And I'd love to say that it establishes a maximum, but it really is just the baseline standards. And we can raise the baseline, but it is just the baseline. We hope for better response. And then we create these policies and protocols to provide good medicine, which based on data and research, and to create an effective and efficient EMS system. So the changes that we make, the necessity is, because regulations change, research and data shows changes, there's policy or regulatory changes, and of course, medicine changes. So we want to create the effective and efficient EMS system by, as you can see with our pyramid, base it all on good research and data, see what the changes are in medicine, and then we change the scope of practice. Our current policies and protocols reflect a progressive medical director leadership so that we really have encompassed the full scope of practice for EMTs and for paramedics on the basic scope of practice. Paramedics have just a couple of things that we don't do, such as blood draws. There's one medication that is covered by other things that we have, and then maintenance of or establishment of, I think, nasogastric tubes. That's really it. We also have, as you can tell from our discussion today, we do have several local optional scope procedures, medications, and things that we've brought into the county, and it's resulted in about 150 policies and protocols. So it's quite a bit. A lot of them are administrative, but a significant amount actually deal with patient care. Our current policies and protocols are on a 3-year review cycle. So that requires just a review of about 50 policies and protocols each year. We also, because of changes, need to add to that number for the ones that are, because of medicine changes, regulatory changes, things like that, we will add to that number. But again, that baseline number is really just, these are our older policies and protocols. We need to look at them to make sure they're still meeting our needs and still current with good medicine. So we don't necessarily make any changes, but we do at least look at them. So the process really, as we have it, starts in September, ends in July 1, where everything becomes effective. We launch at the September MAC, and then we bring what we're looking to change to the November MAC, and we have a public comment period, which, as you can see encompasses the holidays, which is probably not fair to the people who are, very interested in providing their comments. And then, of course, we can see that the January MAC, which occurs early in January, is where the EMS agency brings our responses and changes. And that just is not a lot of time. Of course, any further revision, move forward to the March MAC. And if we have some contentious issues, then we see that, we have May where we've obtained final endorsement, which is well into our 90-day training period. So we're looking at some ideas to help with this process, which will increase the EMS agency time at the front end of preparing the policies and protocols, which would be fairly transparent and behind the scenes for most people. But we're also looking for increased stakeholder participation, moving the policy and protocol cycle for public comment ahead of the holiday period, so that we're not having people conflicted about dealing with family and holiday activities, and they can focus in on the public comment, and then also an earlier release of the policies for wide review before they're submitted for the training purposes. Because one of the things we're finding is that the wider population of paramedics and EMTs sees things, reads things a little different than our bodies that help put it together, and have, one, found typographical errors, and two, they've also found phrasing that they understand a little different than intended. So we've sometimes had to pull back and do a little recreation or administrative corrections, which limits the ability to get the policies out in final form at the end of the cycle. So the benefits that we're looking to bring is public comment not overlapping the holidays, increased opportunities for participation, especially once our bodies have looked at them and made their recommendations, and as we move them, just before we move them out for training purposes, to have wide distribution so that we can have more eyes who are engaged with the policies and protocols, giving their impression of it where things may not be as clear as we intended, or finding the typos that everybody else missed. And then, of course, we're really trying to give the EMS agency more time at critical junctures to put together a very polished product that the system is able to use and also to review through the process. And I know I've carried us past 10 o'clock, but any other comments? Teresa, did I capture the main points in the short time?
We did, yes.
Okay. So any comments? So we're looking to help move things forward a little differently.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, so that brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is EMS system quality improvement programs. And for CQI tag, Deborah has a report for us.
I'll just keep it brief given the time, but we held meetings of all 4 of the quality improvement committees recently in June and August. Relevant data has been compiled and has been presented to those committees. We've made some significant progress on our access to Trauma One. At this point, we seem to have data flowing pretty routinely from Natividad's trauma registry. We have a couple small issues that we're continuing to work on, but that process is going well. And we'll be doing a little bit of a deeper dive into our trauma data using that outcome information and follow-up information. We're working on the CARES contract still and hope to take that to the Board of Supervisors soon. We still are looking to provide a regular series of continuing education offerings. Our next class is tentatively scheduled for October, so we'll have more information coming out on that. Ben Hitchcock was kind enough to provide AMR's information for their trauma patients out to the group that was the working group that was working on our PCR standardization. And our next step will be to get together and review that and keep moving forward with that project. And then from SVMH and ESO, as of September 1st, they implemented their process to provide feedback directly through the ESO patient care documentation system. And if there's any feedback on that, please feel free to pass that along. And Dr. Burley is working on a training course for base hospital physicians that we're planning to present at the next CQI tag meeting for feedback. And then the plan from that would be to make it available online via our website. And then you have the upcoming meeting dates in your packet for stroke and STEMI, CQI tag, and TQuick as well.
Thank you, Deborah. Any questions on that report? Okay, the next item on the agenda is an opportunity for future agenda items. We've already identified one, which is the pre-hospital vaccination and possible testing, which we'll put on the agenda for next MAC meeting. Any other future agenda items to bring up to the committee? Okay, hearing none, that'll move us on to the next item on the agenda, which is announcements and good of the order. So any member of the committee may make announcements or comments. MAC may not discuss or take any action on any item raised during announcements, except to decide whether to place the matter on a subsequent agenda. We do have an announcement regarding Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital achieving exemplary status, and it was recognized by the American Nurses Credentialing Center as a magnet hospital for nursing professionalism, teamwork, and superiority in patient care. So we wanted to recognize Salinas Valley for that accomplishment. Any other items to bring to announcements or good of the order? Okay, hearing none. The next meeting date is scheduled for Wednesday, November 10 at 8:30 a.m. for MAC. I will be out of town on that date, and so I just wanted to propose the possibility of moving MAC up to the previous Wednesday, which would be November 3rd. And so I wanted to see if anyone had any issues with that, or whether there was general consensus that that would work.
I did send that request out via email, and we had 2 or 3 people that replied that they had conflicts with the change date. So probably I haven't heard back from a good chunk of the group, however.
Okay. So we can kind of continue to look at that offline and come up with a date that works for everyone. Okay, any other comments? We'll go ahead and bring this meeting to adjournment then. Thank you all for participating and being here today. We'll look forward to seeing most of you at EMCC, and otherwise have a great day.
Thanks.